إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد بعدد كل داء ودواء وبارك وسلم عليه وعليهم كثيرا.
Let's start. Whoever wants to come, they will join. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Welcome to this week's lecture, Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, welcome to this week's lecture. We're going to carry on from where we left off last week, and this time we're going to probe deeper into the Prophet, into the blessed genealogy of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and mention some important characters. And then next week we're going to take a detour from there back to a subject that we don't like, trade, because we need to discuss Meccan trade. What was Meccan trade? But let's do this, it all fits in. So last lesson we stopped right here, right? So we spoke about the Hajj and how it was different from the Hajj we know today. Most of it was the same, the backbone was the same, but they had innovated in many practices, and some practices became very strange, like dancing naked, whistling, clapping, and entering doors backwards, not trading, having to buy the ihram, and if not having it, then walking around naked. These things were all stopped, and the Hajj was given its true shape again. So now we look at the ancestors of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now, who's seen those family trees where the family of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam goes back all the way to Prophet Adam Alayhi Salam? Who has seen those family trees?
Ustad,
Yep.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we can't see your face. You're projecting, as in the projection, the slides is showing too a bit.
You can only see the slides, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So what you're projecting is you're showing the slides and
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Alright.
fine. Yeah, I thought you could see my face, but if you can't, that's not a problem. The most important thing is the slides, because that's what we need to see. The face is just for I'm using three different things. So I'm using something else to record the screen, something else to record, and I'm using a virtual recorder to show you my face. It's coming off another recording system. So, and I'm using something else for the sound. So as a result, it gets very confusing until I don't have an all-in-one inclusive system. So seeing my face is good. It just, it's just for connection. But as long as you can see the screen, that's the most important thing. I'll have to work out next week what's going on. But thanks for letting me know. Right, so have you seen those family trees? Nasser, welcome. Have you seen those family trees that take Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's genealogy back to Adam Alayhi Salam? Anybody seen them? Wa alaikum assalam, Nasser.
Yeah, I can't.
Right, so those family trees are not accurate. We don't know. Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself said that after Adnan, which is the 21st descendant of his, it's 20th as an ascendant. But if you count, it's 21 because he's not included his father there. They say that Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that up till there it's known. After that, the genealogists make mistakes. So nothing is accurate. So people will give you genealogies taking all the way back to Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. As historians, as amateur historians now, by looking at that family tree, you know that there is problems with that family tree. We don't accept Jewish chronology. Jewish chronology only takes the world back to 6,500 years. That's it. This is the reason why Jews don't believe in millions of years old dinosaurs. They have a problem with believing, if you say that ancient man was walking around 40,000 years, they will have a problem with this, because true Jews only believe that they go as far back as 6,000 something years ago. So if the Muslims who don't know genealogies like that, they have to look into the Bible, and if you take the Bible's genealogy, you're going to end up doing the same thing. So that's the reason why straight away that genealogy is rejected as not being accurate. Then we take the words of Rasulullah, he himself said it's not accurate. But still people have tried. There's no harm in trying, but it might interest people, and some people may say wow, but as amateur historians it shouldn't really faze us, because we know that it's not accurate. But let's have a look to Rasulullah's 20th ancestor or 21st ancestor, Adnan. Right, so up to here it's accurate. So have you all heard this before, that Rasulullah's ancestry goes back 20 generations to Adnan? Have you heard this before?
Yeah.
Good. So let's take a look. You can count all of them, but we're not interested. So we just wanna get a broad sweep, and we want to identify some key figures. Okay, so here is Rasulullah right at the bottom. If we go up, it's Abdullah, his father, al-Muṭṭalib, and Hāshim. al-Muṭṭalib was the greatest, most generous leader that they had. Right, the greatest. You can argue and say, was it Hāshim or was it Qusay? Right, may have been Qusay, it may have been Hāshim, but Abdul Muttalib is generally accepted as being the most gracious ancestor of Rasulullah. So above Rasulullah is Hāshim, and Hāshim we will spend next lesson learning on, because it's very important to know what Hāshim did, because Hāshim changed the fortunes. Hāshim and Qusay changed the fortunes of Mecca completely. So we had Qusay, who we will look at today. I don't want to give it away here. We will look at him again. I think we studied a bit of it last lesson, a few lessons ago. And Hāshim. And then it's Kilab, and then it's Murrah, and then it goes to Ka'ab, Lu'ay, Ghalib, Fihr, Malik, An-Nadr, and then it goes to Kinana, Khuzaymah, Mudrika, Ilyas, Mudar, Nizar, Ma'ad, and Adnan. I read it for barakah. I just read these names for barakah. Kinana is a famous, very big tribal confederation, and Quraysh comes underneath that. Quraysh, the name of Quraysh was actually Fihr. You can see under Kinana, under Malik is Fihr, and his other name was Quraysh. And then we'll have a look at the origin of this name as well. And you can see that they spread famous names like Tamim. We have the Khuza'a on the right hand side. We have Ghatfan on the left hand side. We have the Hawazin on the left hand side. We have Lihyan, Bani Lihyan in the middle somewhere. We have Ghifr, Ghifari, right? The Ghifr tribe. We have Adi, which is the tribe of Abu Bakr, Umar. We have Zuhra, Bani Zuhra, which is an offshoot of Kilab. We have Hanifa, which is of the sub-tribes of the Bani Bakr. We have Taym and Asad. So these are names that will come up again and again in the Seerah, and that's the reason why I know them as well. So just looking here on the left hand side, this is just a line up, right? So important tribal leaders: Adi, Taym, Asad, Zuhra, and Umayyah. Umayyah is the Umayyads, and then the ancestors of Rasulullah completely going up. So you can see from Abdul Manāf, the line of Umayyah separates. So this is the Umayyads, infamous for a variety of reasons. But at this point in history, nothing untoward happened, but it did start to happen. So we can take back the whole argument between the Umayyads and the Ahlul Bayt, leaving aside the Abbasids, because the Abbasids, even though they claimed to take the throne under the name of the Ahlul Bayt, they didn't. But there wasn't direct animosity during the time frame that we're looking into between these tribes, because it was all under Hāshim. Later it formed, and it wasn't as bad as the one that was between Umayyah and the Ahlul Bayt. Right? Yes, it was bad as well. In its own way, it was very bad. They massacred the family of Rasulullah also. But Imam Hassan, Hussein, and these people were killed. Sayyidina Ali were killed in the early period, and Imam Hassan and Hussein certainly were assassinated or martyred under the Umayyads. And today we'll see where that problem first started, that carried on through the generations. On the right hand side, this map, if I'm not mistaken, this legend or this family tree is taken from the book, I was going to say Sleepy Hollow. It's taken from the book Martin Ling's. So if you look in the first few pages of Martin Ling's, you'll see this. Just going to move my name out of the way. So here you can see again Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and al-Muṭṭalib had these sons, right? Harith was his only son. In the beginning he had Harith only. We will see Harith's name come up today. And then he had other children, and Abu Talib. These family trees we should all know by heart. So at some point I'm going to set an assignment of you should literally be able to get a pen and paper, and actually as your homework what I'm going to do is I'm going to get someone to record over your head, just your hand and your paper, where you start making the family tree. So you should go down from Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and name his daughters and sons and wives and who they married, and the family tree finishes with all of the daughters except for Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha, and then it carries on through her chain. So you should name at least up to Imam Jafar as-Sadiq. You should name, really you should be able to name up to 12 imams. And then going backwards, you should name all the ancestors of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the 20th ancestor. If you can't do that, then at least you should know up till Qusay. And then you should be able to name the sub-tribes, the most important ones which we're going to look at today. So this is going to be an upcoming homework, and by heart you should all know this. And your homework is going to be judged by you actually having a camera put over your hand, right? Like, you get the box opening YouTube videos. You're going to have someone filming you from above on a piece of paper as you start to write the names and form the family tree. Okay? And those videos need to be sent to me. So Qusay, and then Abdul Dar, that name's going to come up today. Abdul Manāf is a direct ancestor of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Abdul Uzza and Asad, and then this is the clan of Khatija and Waraka and Zubair, and this is that genealogy. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam married into that family, right? And then Nawfal, the clan of Mut'im. I know the clan of Mut'im, but I didn't know that Nawfal was the progenitor of that. And al-Muṭṭalib and Hāshim. So you'll see when we get to the Seerah, when we had the boycott, al-Muṭṭalib's tribe and people were also part of the boycott, because they were a tribe, but for all intents and purposes, you can say they were part of the Bani Hāshim tribe, because whatever but Bani Hāshim did, they just followed, because they were not as strong as Bani Hāshim. They were a weaker group, and they just went along with the Hashimites. And it comes up in the Seerah, inshallah. Abdul Shams, so Hāshim had Abdul Manaf had another brother called Abdul Shams. This is the clan of Uthman that became the Umayyads, right? Abdul Shams was their progenitor. And it's so close, right? So they're sons of Abdul Manaf. But you will see today how it went horribly wrong, and it split, and it caused whatever we know. I like charts, so I found this one to be quite beautiful. So I just put this one up as well. So you can see Abdul Muṭṭalib. Under Abdul Muṭṭalib are all the uncles of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can see Harith. Well, they're the uncles of Abdullah. They're the brothers of Abdullah, but they would have been the uncles, direct uncles of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Harith, Haji, Zarar, Zubair, and Al-Ma'mun, Abdul Ka'beh, Qasim, Gaidak, Abu Lahab. You will not find all of these names in the Seerah. You will not find them in many of the books, because many of them we don't have a lot of information on, and especially of the daughters. But if you do dig deeper, you'll find the family trees, you'll find their birth dates, their death dates, but we don't know how accurate they are. We can presume there's some amount of accuracy, but you can find them if you dig deeper. But generally the Seerah won't mention this many names, by the way. Then the aunties, Hakim, Arwa, Sufayya you've probably heard of. The other ones you probably won't have heard of much. Hamza is uncle, Abbas his uncle. Abbas was the progenitor of the Abbasid Caliphate, right? The Abbasids promised that they would bring the Ahlul Bayt to the throne. When they took power, they didn't. And the best excuse they made is you wanted the family of Rasulullah. We are the family of Rasulullah. Yes, in one claim of theirs is correct. They are the greater family, right? Banu Abbas was part of the greater family of Rasulullah. But they didn't fulfill on the promise of giving a direct descendant, one of the Ashraf, the Sayyids, on the throne. And then we have Abu Talib. Sayyidina Ali came from that. If you start joining from Abu Talib down, all the marriages and families, it gets very interesting, because you find one person divorcing, you find one person divorcing and another one marrying. So, for example, later down, you find that Abu Bakr married two of the daughters of Sayyidina Ali, karamallahu wajh. And then when you start to join the family trees, so how did Rasul's daughters, so if you look at here, actually it's probably given it here. No, it doesn't. But if you look at Zainab, so who was Zainab married to? And then who was Kulthum married to? Ruqayya and Fatima. Two of them were married to the third caliph, Usman. And then Umar gave one of his daughters to Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And Fatima was married to Ali. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. للتحقير. ليش أنت تحقيره؟ Alright, okay. So then we have, let's look right at the bottom. The grandchildren. تأخير متأخري. ليش أنت متأخري؟ شو كانت تعملي؟
I have some words. Sorry.
Okay. No problem. Welcome to the class.
Thank you.
Alright, so this is the family tree. We can carry on forever about joining these relations and then talking about the beautiful stories and then the tragic stories. But this is enough for this class, I think. You know, it's just a walkthrough, really. Right, okay, so let's start with Kanana. We're going to do this for Barakah. There's not much information in the books, so I just took what I could, and we're just going to quickly go through them and then talk about the main 5 ones. So, Hadith of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, verily Allah chose Kinana from the sons of Ismāʿīl. He chose the Quraysh from Kinana. He chose the tribe of Hāshim from the Quraysh, and He chose me from the tribe of Hāshim. So, the most Mubarak tribe in all of creation is Kinana. From Kinana it's Quraysh, and from Quraysh is Hāshim, and from Hāshim Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Right, so Hāshim is the most Mubarak tribe, Bani Hāshim, in all of creation. From there Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then obviously his progeny are the most Mubarak. They are the Ahlul Bayt. So Adnan, the 20th ascendant of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I hope I wasn't saying descendant. I hope I said ascendant in all of the thingies. So he is of the progeny of Qaidar bin Ismāʿīl. Right, Qida is the tribe mentioned in the Bible. Already we can start to see that the Arabs didn't have a proper name here. Clearly you can see that either they didn't have a proper name here, or it's an Arabized name, because Qaida just sounds very strange. It doesn't even sound Arabic properly. Right, so this is taken from Qida, which if you look at the biblical genealogies, and if you remember right in the beginning when we were talking about who are the Arabs, remember that very long lecture, who are the Arabs? This name came up. Abu Ja'far bin Habib records in his Tariq that Ibn Abbas maintains Ma'ad, Rabi'a, Khuzaymah and Asad, forebears of Rasulullah were all strict adherents to Millat Ibrāhīm, the creed of Ibrahim. Remember them politely and graciously. Zubair bin Bakr narrates directly that Rasulullah said, avoid talking ill of Mudar and Rabi'a as they were Muslims. Another indirect narration of Sa'ad bin Musayyib also lends support to this narration. This is in Fath al-Bari, so we don't have a bad opinion about any of the answers of Rasulullah. And that's very important to say that. Why? Because we're going to look at some controversial material in today's lesson, inshallah. So Ma'ad, another descendant, the name reads with a fatha on the meme and a tashdeed on the dal. The name is Ma'ad. Ma'adda. The name is derived from adad, which literally means to count, which basically means that that was probably not his real name. That's just a name that they did it because he's an ancestor, and to count, according to some people, the name Ma'ad is derived from the meaning Isfad, which means to thwart or sabotage. Ma'ad was an extraordinary, strong and gallant warrior. He spent his entire life fighting against the Bani Israel and established his triumph in every one of these battles. Right, so again, as historians, this sounds very strange. This is taken from Zarqani's volume 1, page 79. He spent his entire life fighting the Bani Israel. Why? The Bani Israel were in Israel. Why would an Arab in the desert, and Arabs that really weren't even, as we saw a huge amount of activity, at least going back to the time of Isa alayhi salam in the Arabian Peninsula, and these Arabs didn't feature anywhere, right? These Arabs, and had he been in the employ of Rome, yes, then you would. But at that time, not even the Ghassanids were in the employ of the Romans, right? So I don't buy this story. There's no historical evidence. Until more historical evidence is forthcoming, there's no reason why I should buy this story that he spent his life fighting the Bani Israel. Nizar, derived from the word nazar, which means few or little. Abul Faraj Asbahani says, since he was a very, very unique person of his times and matched by very few people, he was given the name Nizar. Alama Suhail says, when Nizar was born, his forehead was glittering with the nur of Rasulullah. His father was overjoyed, and in celebration of this joy, he invited people over for a feast and remarked, all this is Nizar, in lieu of the rights of this child. This is how he got the name Nizar. Tariq al-Khamis says that Nizar was the most strikingly handsome and exceptionally brilliant man of his times. Some are of the opinion that Nizar means skinny and weak. Since he was a man of slender build, he was referred to as Nizar. He is buried in Zatul Jaish, an area close to Medina. Mother. So can we have Nasser read Mother, please?
Yeah, okay. His actual name was Abu Ilyas, was that appellation, was Mudar was his title. The name Mudar is derived from Madir, which literally means sour. He was incredibly fond of sour foods and sour milk, hence the name Mudar. He was remarkably talented and wise man. Some of his words of wisdom are as follows. He who sows evil will reap sorrow. The best form of goodness is that which is done without delay. So influence your hearts to embrace whatever they loathe, to carry out and divert the hearts from succumbing to their base desires. There is no distinguishing feature between evil and good except patience. He was a man with a remarkably melodious voice. The technique of Hadi, a chorus of chants sung to prompt the camels to move at a more rapid pace, was actually formulated by him. Ibn Sa'ad writes in his Tabaqat that Abdullah bin Khalid indirectly narrates that Rasulullah said, do not speak ill of Mudar, he was a Muslim.
Thank you, well done. Next is Ilyas. Can we have Rumaysa read, please?
He had the namesake of Hazrat Ilyas. The sunnah of forwarding the hadi animals towards Baytullah in Makkah was instituted by Ilyas ibn Mudar. It has been said that Ilyas ibn Mudar would quite often hear from his own back the talbiyah of Hajj being recited by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It has also been narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do not speak ill of Ilyas, as he was a believer Allama Zarqani says, I have absolutely no idea about the soundness of this hadith.
Okay, so the story about he could hear the talbiyah from his own back, which was recited by Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay, that sounds very miraculous, right? So I don't think that's a true story. There are many legends, by the way. When you read the Seerah, you will find many legends, but the sources of them are dubious, right? So you will come across many of these stories, right? So I mean, if I deny this story, it doesn't make me a kafir, right? But as someone with, common sense, do we say, is this possible? At that time, they didn't, you can say with most likelihood that they didn't know that their ancestor would be a great prophet. Maybe later on, the books do mention it. Even then, you have to kind of ask, how did they know? How did they know? Right? But yes, okay, especially when we tie them in with the stories of the Jews knowing, then we can say, okay, maybe the Arabs knew also. First, we have to verify, did the Jews really know, or is this again hearsay? Because we hear it in the Seerah a lot, but we need some credible evidence from hadith or a sound khabar that says that the Jews did know. And I think we do have, right? I need to check in Ibn Hisham, right? I would like to hazard a guess and say yes. Then we can say, okay, that gives some credence to the Arabs knowing. But knowing 20 generations back, I don't really buy it. It doesn't make me a non-believer. It's just my personal opinion, right? I like to see evidence in everything I do. I like to see the sunnah of Allah in creation as a pattern, as a repeating pattern in creation. Not events that happen very strange and then we don't see them happen in our time today, right? So this is my understanding of it. So Mudrika, can we have Aisha read, please?
Most ulama are of the opinion that Mudrika's name was Amir. Muhammad ibn Ishaq says that his name was Amir. Zarqani on page 79, and his title was Mudrika, which is derived from Idrak, literally meaning achievement, since he achieved virtually every form of stature in his life. He was awarded the title of Mudrika, the achiever.
Okay, good. So we can see we don't have much information on them. So I'll just read through the next ones. Khuzaymah ibn Abbas says that Khuzaymah died in Millat Ibrāhīm. You can see that I've copied this from one of the books that I recommended everybody read for Seerah. It's more of a reference work than Siratul Mustafa, I think it's called. And you can see there's Hazrat and Millat Ibrāhīm, because that book was written in India or Pakistan. That's why you're getting these kind of sounding names. Kinana, he was regarded in high esteem amongst all Arabs due to his noble graciousness and vast knowledge. People would travel far and wide just to pay him a special visit. Nadar is derived from Nadara, which means luminous and verdant. Owing to his exceptional handsomeness, he was entitled Nadar. His actual name was Qais. Malik, his first name was Malik, whilst his appellation was Abul Harith. He was one of the most prominent chieftains of the Quraysh. Fahr was his name, while Quraysh was his title. According to some, his name was Quraysh, while his title was Fahr. His descendants are referred to as Qurayshi, whilst other Arab descendants not hailing from Fahr are referred to as Kinani. Some ulama are of the opinion that the term Quraysh is used to refer to the progeny of Nadr ibn Kinana. So if you go back here, you'll see that there is a understanding. There's two ways of thinking this, and then the trees will split. Yasir Qadi discusses this, I think, in his Seerah, and we could actually, I did look at it, but I didn't do it. I don't know why I didn't show you that, but it doesn't really matter for our Seerah anyway. But if you're into genealogy, then you can have a look at the different understandings. Hafiz Iraqi writes in his Alfiya. So I'm not sure was it Fahr or was it past Fahr? I'm not sure. But if someone is into genealogy, you can have a look at the differences that crop up. As for Quraysh, the most authentic opinion is that they are the descendants of Fahr, but most are of the opinion that they are the okay, so it is. Yeah. So this is the controversy here. Fahr and Nadr. Hafiz Ala says, this is the most authentic view. The scholars are of the opinion that Quraysh refers to the progeny of Nadr bin Kanana. Some marfu ahadith also support this view. It is also reported that Imam Shafi'i was of the opinion that Quraysh refers to the progeny of Nadr ibn Kinana. Some Hufaze hadith, I should say hadith then, isn't it? Some Hufaze hadith scholars say that Fihr's father Malik did not leave behind any offspring apart from Fihr. Therefore, a descendant of Fihr will unquestionably be a descendant of Nadr as well. Hence, the diverse opinion regarding the designation of Quraysh have now been decisively established. So these are the two opinions, and then you have their supporting evidences as well of if it was Nadr ibn Kanana or Fihr. Reasons for the name Quraysh. Does anybody know why they were called Quraysh, by the way? Anybody know? Okay, Quraysh actually means shark, right? But there's no sea in the Arabian desert, so why would they name themselves shark? Quraysh means shark or little shark. It is said that Quraysh got their name from gathering together after they had separated from gathering together, maybe expressed as taqarrush. Right? Hafiz Badruddin Aini cites 15 different reasons for the designation of the Quraysh as Quraysh. For further details, see Umdadul Qari, the commentary of Sahih Bukhari, to know about the various reasons for Quraysh. So Ka'ab is the next one. Nasra, do you want to read?
To initiate a weekly congregation on Friday was Ka'ab bin Lu'ay. Ka'ab bin Lu'ay would assemble all the people every Friday and deliver a sermon. He would firstly praise Allah Ta'ala and explain that Allah Ta'ala created the skies, the earth, the moon, the sun, and all other forms of creation. He would then go on to give them some advice. He would also encourage them to maintain favorable family ties with their kinsfolk. He would also prophesy, "A prophet is to appear among my descendants. If you happen to encounter that time, make sure you follow him." He would also recite the following stanza: "If only I could be present when he, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, proclaims his message, when the Quraysh would irrationally shun the truth and forsake him rather deplorably." Farah and Talab say that previously Yawm al-Jumu'ah, the day of Jumu'ah, used to be called Yawm al-Aruba, the day of Arabism. Ka'ab bin Lu'ay was the first person to refer to it as Yawm al-Jumu'ah, the day of Jumu'ah or congregation. In his Tariq, Hafiz ibn Kathir also makes mention of the weekly sermons delivered by Ka'ab ibn Lu'ay.
Okay, excellent. So in this book, Ibn Kathir normally gives some sort of evidences. Even if they're weak, he tends to put down everything. So if you want to find out the authenticity of this story, all of these stories now, they're not hadith. So we need to sometimes put our heads together and think, okay, Yawm al-Araba, Yawm al-Jum'ah, the day of Arabism. Why would they do this? What's the sense in naming one day Arabs? The Arabs didn't have a collective identity back then. They were disparate tribes. So there was no marching under the banner of one Arab. So you need to start questioning what's the meaning of Yawm al-Arab. Right? So it becomes suspect. I have my doubts on this now. Right? And I hope nobody jumps on me. Not from the class, but outsiders. But these are the reasons. I don't have a problem accepting something. Show me the evidence and I'll accept it. But as a critic, as a natural historian, these are the first things that come to mind. Right? And then Ibn Kathir, if you read his version of the Seerah, it's 4 volumes. It's absolutely massive. And I guarantee you're not going to get past the first few pages. Because it's every single report put into that book. Right? So it's more of a reference work. It's not a straightforward Seerah. And you'll find all the different stories of one story. The one story that ends up in Seerah, in that book you'll find 2 or 3 versions. In Ibn Hisham Seerah also you'll find 2 versions sometimes. Right? So this is for people who really, really want to get to the most authentic Seerah. You would study these reference works as well. So he's probably going to give an evidence. God knows how strong the evidences are going to be, especially for the day of gathering on a Friday. Right? I don't have a problem agreeing that possibly he gathered them on a Friday. But then when he said, if only I could be present when he, Rasulullah, proclaims his message. Again, that sounds a bit suspect to me. Right? That the generations previously knew about a prophet to come. So then you have to ask the question, when he came, why didn't they accept? Right? Rasulullah's own progenitors, Abbas didn't accept. Abu Talib didn't accept. Abu Lahab didn't accept. These are the direct first cousins of Rasulullah. Right? So then you have to ask that question, and this will come up in the Seerah, inshallah, when we get to that story. When we get to a few stories, we're going to critically analyze certain stories, and then say, well, if A plus B has to equal C, but why did it equal D? And sometimes you have to then really do some mental gymnastics to try to give an opinion that everybody else has given. But then I will still challenge that opinion and say, look, play devil's advocate. There is opinion A, opinion B, and an opinion C. You tell me which one sounds more logical to you. The opinions that the Seerah writers have given you and that everybody has just picked up on, or now that we know what we know from everything that we've studied so far, what would you say? Don't forget, they're all akhbar. You cannot, some of these stories are not authenticated, so it's okay to give your opinion. And if you have an opinion based on love and it's gone through the generations, okay, no problem. I will narrate many of those opinions as well, because it's a labor of love in the Seerah. But only in critical Seerah, deeper Seerah, will we lay them bare and say, okay, let's have a look at these now. But otherwise, if I'm teaching Seerah outside of this class, I will narrate many of them just for the sake of embellishing the stories and adding more content and adding more beauty to the stories. But obviously we're going to do things a bit different in this course, inshallah. So murra is derived from mirarat, which means bitterness. The Arabs would refer to a brave or valiant warrior as murra, as though this person is dreadfully bitter for his adversaries. The ta in the name murra is not indicative of a feminine noun, but it signifies that the noun is used as hyperbolic sense. So this is the book Sirat al-Mustafa. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's and Hazrat Talha were his descendants. So if you look at the family tree, you'll see that. I mentioned to you before that the Arabs would keep vicious names for their children. And the reason they would keep those vicious names is not for themselves, but for their enemies. So when they called their son like for example, dog, right? So the understanding is that to call yourself dog didn't mean dog today. Dog is a very loyal person. In the desert, in nature, your dog is your best friend. Dogs were very loyal. So this tribe is very loyal. That's what it means. Thizija, whose biography I told everybody, his escapades across the Arabian sands, I told everybody to read. His second book, which he talked about the Marsh Arabs. Remember I told you that the Marsh Arabs are distinctly different. And I even sent you some links on YouTube if I'm not mistaken. If not, you can search Marsh Arabs. The Marsh Arabs are the direct descendants of the Sumerians. Okay, so in their DNA, they're not Arab. Remember, the definition of Arab only ethnically only goes to the real desert Arabs. So Iraq proper is not desert like that. It's in Mesopotamia, and those people were not Arabs, they were Arabized later. So the Marsh Arabs, you can YouTube them. They're a very different people living in the marshes with a high chance that they are descendants of the Sumerians who have disappeared today. They would name their children Khanzir. They would name their children, literally you have a son and you're calling him Khanzir. He mentions it in there. And when he asked why, they said to stop our son getting Ain, to stop him getting the evil eye. Right? So it's weird thinking. But many people are Muslims, but there's a lot of jahaliyyah amongst Muslims to this day. Many people do that. Like most people still believe that the month of Safar is a very harsh month. It's a hard month. Don't start any plan during this month. Don't set off on a journey. Have you lot been told this in your families, by the way? The month of Safar. Anybody?
No, never heard.
Okay, it runs in our families. I've heard this one before, and if I'm not mistaken, I've seen a hadith that warns against believing this. Right? I'm pretty sure there is a hadith by Rasulullah that warns against this. The pagan Arabs used to believe that this was a hard month. We have the 4 luminous months, the Mubarak months. We're in one of them now. And then we had one particular month that was a month of, like when all evil descended, badness descended, and you don't start plans on this month. And Muslims have adopted this, right? So even though Islam is here, we still believe in horoscopes. We still believe in astrology, star signs. We still like our palms red. We still go to soothsayers and ask for our futures, probably look into crystal balls, look at astrology tables, right? None of this is ended in us. So that's the reason why you still get people believing in Safar to be a hard month. Don't wear the color black. Don't wear black shoes. Don't buy a black car. Wear brown instead if you want to wear dark, because black is a hard color. Where is this coming from? None of this is coming from Islam. This is all Jahiliyyah. And some Jahiliyyah is our own Jahiliyyah from our own ethnicity and our own indigenous affair, and some Jahiliyyah we brought over from the Arabs, like the one about Safar. This is Jahili Arab culture, and we adopted it after becoming Muslim, but we didn't adopt the Muslim Sunnah that it's nothing wrong with this month, but we adopted the Jahili part of it. So likewise, you have Arabs in the 1950s in Iraq calling their son Khanzir. Sayyidina Ali wanted to name his son Harb. Rasulullah said no, name him Hassan, which is the opposite. Then he wanted to name his son Harb again, and he said no, his name is Hussein, right? And it was only after this that he could name his children as he pleased, but because he wanted his sons to to strike fear into the enemies. If the son is called Harb, or already you're like, wow man, this son is all about war, and he's named himself War, so what's he going to be like on the battlefield? So this is the reason why names like Kalb and everything. So here we have Mirarat, which means bitterness. Who would name their son bitterness? But it's not for yourself, it's for your enemies. Kilab. Aisha, can we have you reading Kilab, please?
Kilab is the plural of pen, which literally means dog. Abu al-Ruqaysh al-A'rabi, was once asked, why is that you select such disgusting names like Kalb, dog, and say wolf for your children, whilst you give your slaves such delightful names as Rizq, prosperous or fortunate, and Raba, beneficiary. Abu al-Ruqaysh A'rabi replied, our sons' names are selected for our enemies, whilst our slaves' names are chosen for ourselves. In other words, slaves are maintained for our personal service. On the contrary, our children gallantly engage our foes in mortal combat. We prefer such names for them so that the enemy would at least be struck with some degree of trepidation on hearing such reported names. Kilab's actual name was either Hakim or Marwa or Muhazzab, contingent to a number of differing opinions. Kilab was very fond of hunting dogs. He would also always keep a fantastic pack of game dogs with him. This is how he ended up with the name Kilab, literally meaning dogs.
So one of the ancestors of Rasulullah literally means dogs. Qusay, the famous five: Abdullah, al-Muṭṭalib, Hāshim, Manāf, and Qusay. You should remember these five names. Everybody should remember these five names in this exact order that I gave them. Okay, so this is now where it all starts to get excellent. This is why when a prophet is born, he comes. There are certain reasons that people have a hard time understanding, but when you go beyond your emotions, if you start understanding them, you see the logic behind them. So when I was young, my father taught me that a prophet needs to be beautiful. By virtue of his prophethood, he needs to be beautiful. And my teacher asked me why, and I said because people are drawn to beautiful people. And she said to me, no, Jesus Christ didn't need to be beautiful, it's the message. Okay, it's the message, right? But would you take the message from a man who is dressed up as a fakir, one of those half-naked men who sit on rubbish dumps wearing nothing, with unkept beards and hair all over the world? You get them in India, Pakistan, the Arab world, in Europe. And if you turn around one day and said to you, hey everybody, listen to me, I've been sent word from God, I am a prophet, would you believe him? No, never in a million years, right? But if somebody who is beautiful of intellect, beautiful of manners, beautiful of face and body and clothes, and beautiful of lineage, would you believe him? 100 times yes, you're more open to the message. So the lineage part, which is these 5 descendants, is very important, because people can turn around and say, and it comes up in the Seerah, you'll see it, the reason people like Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl, and who was the other one? Umayyah ibn Khalaf, and who's the my mind is slipping me. The father of Muawiyah. The reason these people had a hard time in accepting the message. Abu Sufyan became a Muslim afterwards, but initially, because there was a massive rivalry between all of the Arabs, which we started about this time. So we'll start to see it now. And that rivalry is mentioned in the Quran, and it forced them to not believe. They did kufr. And kufr doesn't mean I don't see God, so I'm not going to believe. Right? That you can say agnostic. Kufr means to cover, kafara, to cover, to veil. So you know the truth, but you hid it. So internally, they knew he's a prophet because of all the reasons that we just gave. But how could they accept? Because there was rivalry, and that rivalry comes up in the Quran, and that rivalry comes up in the Seerah. And we'll look inshallah when it comes up. So why the 5 most important were Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's descendants? He could have come from anywhere under Adnan. But why these names, and why was he chosen from these? It's because the Arabs said it. They said that the story is attributed to 2 different people, right? Abu Jahl and Abu Sufyan. But the Abu Jahl one is that we were racing neck and neck, and the Quran mentions this, that you are, for you, life is your horses, your women, and this and that, your sons, your wealth, and your horses, and you're just racing towards the end, and that's it. Your life this is what you've made your life. Whereas the life of the hereafter, what I'm calling you to, Allah is calling, the Prophet's calling, is much bigger and greater. So he said we were neck and neck, i.e. Banu Hāshim took over, and then later on these other tribes became powerful, and they were racing neck and neck for superiority in Mecca. And all of a sudden, like, one tribe would feed and the other tribe would feed. One tribe had an illustrious son, the other tribe had an illustrious son. One was a great warrior, the other was a great warrior. And all of a sudden, Banu Hāshim has come out with the Prophet. How can we compete that? If we draw another prophet, all of a sudden everybody's going to say, oh, you just copied them, and it's a lie. Right? Banu Hāshim have come out with the Prophet. How can we possibly compete now? So that was the whole objection. And there's a dream, the story is disputed, but it's narrated in the Seerah, and we will narrate it as well, inshallah, that when the Battle of Badr happened, and Badr happened by chance, by the way. It wasn't preordained. It wasn't a fixed day for a battle like Uhud was, which was 1 year later. Badr just happened innocently by chance. And again, when we discuss Badr, we'll see how Badr came about. One of the men went running back into Mecca, split the camel's nose, so it's bleeding, ripped his clothes, and rode into Mecca, shouting and screaming, "Your caravans, your goods, we're under attack!" And then they rallied around, and that's how Badr happened, right? And a night before that battle, one of the cousins of Rasulullah, I think it was one of the aunties, she had a dream, and she saw a rock crash from the mountain. There's mountains around Mecca. So a rock fell down, and it broke at the base of Mecca, and it disintegrated into little stones, and each stone ended up crashing through the gate or the door or settled outside the houses of prominent members of Quraysh. So she had foreboding. So the next day she went and told this news, and Abu Jahl, was it Abu Jahl? I can't remember now. He mocked her and he said, "Since when did you have another prophetess? Another prophet?" So all of a sudden another prophet has appeared. He's mocking. Everything was mocking for that guy, right? And what happened is that every single house that stone fell, the rock shattered into various small pieces, probably still big pieces. Every area the rocks went or the stones went, those tribal chiefs all died. Quraysh lost its cream that day. right? And it was all unplanned. And you can say, you can blame Abu Jahl for that. Solely you can blame Abu Jahl for that. And you can see why the blame rests 100% on his shoulders on that day. So nobody can say that Rasulullah faked this position, because all of Mecca is, ever since they started trade, right? All money corrupts, don't forget, money corrupts. When they were poor, everything was going sweet. They were one unit. Everything was going excellent for them. But the minute they started making money, and they only started making money from after Qusay, because everything had died down. You know that those massive battles and upheavals, the sand had finally settled, the dust had gathered on the floor, and you could start to see the horizon. Everybody, metaphorically, everybody was lying dead on the battlefield, and Quraysh raised its head and said, oh, we can walk free now. And Quraysh started trading, right? Trading bought them money. There was no competition. They were still small. They were still trading there, but meaning Quraysh now were free to trade without being stopped by anybody. Because you'll see when we discuss it further, you cannot just simply pack a camel and say, I'm going to Syria to trade. You're going to get stopped on the way. You're going to get stopped by highway robbers, first of all. If you manage to get past highway robbers, you're going to end up in territories where they're not going to let you pass, right? They're going to ask for a permit, a business permit. And you're thinking, in the desert? Yes, in the desert. If you don't have that permit, right, they will not let you through. If you're going to, for example, from Mecca to Medina to see family, they will know, because they can see from your camel. So they're like, okay, pass through. But if you've got goods on you, you're not one camel load of goods is not enough. That's not considered trade, because that's madness. That's economically not viable. You need like a train, a caravan train. I would say minimum 20, right? Between 10 and 20. And then you're going to get stopped. So once the dust settled, Quraysh became something, and then all of these things that you see, that you're going to see in the Seerah, and you're going to see this lesson, started. So Rasulullah could have been born from anybody else under Adnan, and then if he became a prophet, the Arabs would have said, oh, you're only doing this is because we have the illustrious grandfathers. You don't. So you're now trying to claim ascendancy over us by claiming prophethood. So to stop that, Rasulullah was born under descendants that were incredibly illustrious and did so much for Quraysh that nobody could doubt his reason for becoming famous. Because you already are famous, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You already are famous because you have al-Muṭṭalib, you have Qusay, you have Hāshim, you have Manāf, right? So these are all reasons. And remember, I told you how Allah does things. So normally you have a converse, but always both work in the favor of Rasulullah. So for example, you have black and white, right? So black is dark, okay, it's not good. Switch the light on, oh, now you have light. Makes sense. Oh, black is not good, but light is good. Makes sense, right? So remember, we everything in creation is two, right? So you can say, a prophet cannot lie. If you say a prophet can lie, but he's a human being, but he's a prophet still, which is what other people may say, Christians and other people may say, right? It just shows his humanness. So when you look at the outrageous stories of prophecy of other prophets in the Bible, they say it just shows the humanity of those prophets. Really? I'm not going to go into the disgusting stories, but this is depravity, not humanity. Humanity would be a lie, not depravity, sexual depravity and crazy things like that. But then even a lie puts doubt into a claim of prophecy. Right? So that's why we believe the prophets can't lie. But what I'm trying to say here is you can start to do the opposites and try to justify them. But the opposites will never be that one answer, because in a twofold answer, you cannot have yes being the answer and no being the answer. It's always going to be one or the other. Right? You can't have both. But when it comes to stories like this, both sides defend Rasulullah. Right? And if these things are not documented in books, we have enough sense ourselves. So for me, I'm using this. Didn't come from a book. I'm using this as evidence now by myself. Because I always tend to see everything in the favor of Rasulullah. Why that is because I don't close my mind off and say, okay, I'm going to read a Seerah book and I'm only going to go as far as that Seerah book goes. Well, if you're going to read something like the moon split, you're not really going to go very far in Seerah, are you? If you're going to read the next book beyond that, which the famous one is the sealed nectar, again, you're not going to go very far, are you? Right? So think outside the box, people. One of the biggest takeaways from this course is think outside the box. There's nothing stopping you stepping over the mark if it's in the favor of Rasulullah. The ulama say this, right? If anything in the seerah goes against the shan, the magnitude of Rasulullah, we will reject that story even if it's a sahih hadith. So then by the same logic, why can somebody not insert another story? So if you're going to embellish and you're going to say, well, we believe that Rasulullah was born circumcised, we believe he was born with his finger raised up, we believe he was born and he fell down in prostration. I don't believe the prostration one, by the way. The finger one, I don't believe, but it's possible a kid does this, right? It's possible that you can't see the camera. I'm looking at the camera. But again, these are not verified stories. We keep them in the seerah for embellishments. Okay, well then if you're going to do that to prove prophecy, why can somebody else not give his understanding to prove prophecy as well? Which is what I'm doing now. So for example, we know that one of the claims that the Arabs made, they said, "O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know your illustrious ancestors. So, and we don't know you as a liar, right? So we just want you to stop saying what you say." So they didn't harm him because of his illustrious ancestors. They had to respect him because of his illustrious ancestors. And they had to respect him for himself as well, that you're not a liar. So we know that part. You know, he could say, I'm not a small person. If you believe that I'm doing this for fame or I want to raise my name, look who my ancestors are. Oh, I already have the greatest ancestors. Okay? Right? So that works in his favor there. And then to turn around, it works in his favor that, "Oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have the greatest ancestors, so we know that you're not lying, deceiving, or that's one proof." And the converse would be, you're not seeking fame because you have the greatest ancestors. So both ways it goes in the favor of Rasulullah, right? Having the famous ancestors, and if he never had them, then they could say, well, you would have sought fame. So no, I don't need to seek fame because I have the greatest ancestors. Right? I hope it made sense. So Qusay, his name was Majmu'ah, literally meaning a gatherer. Right? So he gathered everybody. It is derived from Jam'ah, which means to draw together. Since Qusay was instrumental in uniting all the Quraysh clans who were scattered all over the place, he was designated as the Mujammi, the unifier. Quraysh were a tribe scattered around and outside Mecca. Some lived in the mountains, some in valleys, some in the desert. As a poet describes it, your father was Qusay, who was hailed as Mujammi. By way of him, Allah Ta'ala united all the tribes who were descendants of Fihr. So Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Imam Shafi'i reported Qusay's actual name was Zaid. So Qusay, Maryam, do you want to read? This is the story we touched on last time, okay? But we're going to quickly, briefly go through it on our bridge across the ancestry of Rasulullah. Do you want to read? Is she still there? Who can see the messages? I don't know. Alright, okay. Can we have Aisha read, please?
The mother of Qusay, Fatima, married Kilab. She had two sons, Zuhra and Qusay. Kilab died when Qusay was an infant. Fatima married Rabi'a ibn Haram, who took her to Asham. She had another son called Raj. The Qusay knew no other father. When during a fight he came to know his true identity, his mother calmed him by saying he was of better lineage than his cousins. "Oh my son, your descendant is nobler than theirs. you are the son of Kilab bin Murrah, and your people live in the proximity of the holy house of Mecca. As a result of this, Qusay will return to Mecca and his people.
Excellent. So one massive takeaway from this story is we say whatever is going to hit you is never going to miss you, and what's going to miss you will never hit you. So even though Qusay, and we'll see further down inshallah another member as well, were taken away from Mecca, were born outside Mecca, lived most part of their life in Sham, which is very far away, they came back to fulfill their purpose. So Qusay was needed. He's the grandfather of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was needed in Mecca, right? And we can see, normally people start to say that if you look around this time, you start to see the furnishing of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam by Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala. So you start to see the plan Allah's putting into play now, right? People go this far back, but I've taken it back. I took it back to 200 AD, right? So people normally go as far as the 5th century, and they start from Qusay and they say, look, this is proof that Allah is now furnishing the plan. Yes, it's correct. It's perfect. People can articulate this much better than me. But my studies, my historical studies, whatever we've studied together shows me that Allah put the plan in much further, right? So now we start to see the magic in play now. So Qusay, he's born, right? His father dies while Qusay was an infant. He doesn't know his father. al-Muṭṭalib doesn't know his father. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam doesn't know his father. Subhanallah, right? Fatima marries Rabi'a and she took him to Sham. She had another son called Daraj there. Qusay didn't know his own father. Then one day during a fight, the other tribe, the other people mocked him, and they said to him during a fight, they said, you're not even from us. You know, your mother married him, your stepfather, and he's not even your father, right? And that really upset him. So he went to his mother and he said to his mother, what's this I'm hearing? And she said, it's true, but don't be sad, my son. Your descendants are much nobler than theirs. You are the son of Kilab ibn Murrah, and your people live in the proximity of the holy house in Mecca. So as a result of this, when he grew up, probably a few years later, he packed his bags and said, I'm off to my people. So now remember, when Qusay gets there, he's considered an outsider. See, these are the fine points of Seerah you should think about. These are the really detailed points of Seerah, right? Qusay goes back as an outsider. He's looked upon as an outsider. Yani, they welcome you, but don't forget, you're new, right? You're new. You're a bit of an outsider. You know, in your habits, your customs, your adat, the way you look at things in the town, because you're an outsider. al-Muṭṭalib was also an outsider. And Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, for a while, you could consider he was an outsider, because he was sent away at a very young age to be nursed by Halimatu Sa'diyah. So when he came back, that's the only mother he really knew. Is he going to be more attached to his mother, or will he be more attached to his wet nurse, who breastfed him for longer, looked at him for longer, comforted him for longer, and his body touched her body for longer? Right? So when he comes back to Mecca, all of a sudden from the open desert, was he not a bewildered child walking the streets of Mecca? All of a sudden from the desert plateau, the freedom of the desert, and having somebody who you know as your mother, your wet nurse, coming back to another woman who is your mother, but yani, you have stronger ties with your first mother, yani the wet nurse, and now you're hemmed into the small dark alleyways of Mecca. These boys play different, look different, dress different, they're more dirtier. They're speaking a bit of a different accent. Right? They look at you like strangers. They don't accept you so quickly to play with them. Where is your real mother anyway? Where is your nursing mother anyway? She's left. You telling me Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wasn't sad, wasn't upset, wasn't bewildered? Yes, he was. But these small details are overlooked. And this is the purpose of this class, to draw dots. From the beginning I've said this, to draw dots. So just because we're not going to be drawing historical dots anymore, once we enter the Seerah, you have to start finding emotional dots, spiritual dots, humanitarian dots for yourselves, right? So start thinking like that. Start looking at the details now. We're moving. Remember what I said to you? We zoned out first. We looked at the bigger picture, and that was the milieu of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's the fortnight map complete now. Now we're zooming in. So now we're looking at the tiny, tiny details on that fortnight map, the Assassin's Creed map. If a cup is left on a rock pillar and the assassin walks past, you need to think, why was it left there? This is Seerah. Everything has a purpose. Okay? So he was an outsider. He goes back to his people. So at that time, the guardianship of Mecca belonged to Khuza'ah. At that time, we read this before, the Quraysh were living as very small people outside of Mecca, living in tents, living in camel hair tents. You want to know how the Quraysh were living? I should have had pictures to show you. Camel hair tents in the valleys, in the mountains. Not a very glamorous existence. Nothing like the existence that they had after Quraysh brought them into Mecca. Right? When you look at the message, or when you look at Umar series and you see the way they lived in Mecca, right? Even that's glorified. It was even more primitive than that. But some of the clans had money, so they were set apart from the rest of the Meccans. At this time, they weren't even in Mecca. So if you're living on the outskirts of Mecca, how are you living? In stone housing? No. You're living in camel hair tents. You're living, and you want to know how they live? Just, if you saw the video of mine that I made on Tizija called Man and Camel, or Badu and Camel, right? Man and his camel, the Badu and their camel, you will see how they live. And it wasn't very glamorous. So people from the outside are always more hungrier, always more innovative, always waiting for an opportunity. Right? So when Qusay came, he did something extraordinary. He became very close to the chief of Mecca, who was the chief of Khuza'ah, whose name was Hulayl ibn Habshiyah. Habshiyah is a very strange name there now. Right? And we will find out that there were many people supposedly from Habasha around Mecca with the Quraysh at that time. So the name Hulayl ibn Habshiyah, unless it has a different meaning, we know for sure that he didn't have black ancestry. Right? What does this name mean? In the first instance, it looks suspect that it's from Habasha. But then obviously you read the genealogies and then you find out if he was or wasn't. But that's not the argument. I'm just pointing out. I'm just trying to make you think like historians. So I'm just critically pointing something out. Qusay managed to marry the chief's daughter, which was a excellent swoop. You know, like an outsider comes from a different land. He's a noble man living in the tents. Imagine the uproar. Imagine the scandal. You gave your daughter to a tent dweller outside of Mecca. Which chief does that? But it happened. Something must have been. He must have seen something in Qusay. Upon the chief's death, Qusay was by default nominated by his father-in-law as chief of Mecca. But this caused problems with the Hulayl's son. So all of a sudden there's a massive uproar. What? You're giving him over us, and him who's an outsider? No way are we gonna accept these terms, because filial piety, especially in Arabia, and you'll see this in this lesson, is very important. Yani you don't go against your fathers. You just don't. It's not something that is even, yani it's not something that is even conceivable in the Arabian Peninsula, or even in the Far East, even in China and all of these places. It's inconceivable. You know, we only have this idea because we're born and bred in England. You don't go against your father. But this is something outrageous. What's going on? Qusay, you're giving everything over to Qusay. We fought for this. We kicked out the Jurham, and we fought for this, and we've been masters for 400 years. And now all of a sudden, it's going to go to Quraysh, and Quraysh from outside. So obviously the war banners were drawn. There was going to be a fight. Qusay sought the help of his tribe, which is Quraysh, and also his in-laws. So he sent word to he managed to gather some people from his own people that were up in the north, and he called them down, and they had a skirmish or whatever it was back then. They didn't have pitched battles. People with very low populations, they don't have pitched battles. This is what you need to understand. Even the Battle of Badr, right? You're probably thinking of of medieval style battles where people had spears and armor and shields, and they're like 100 in 1,000. Each line is made of 1,000, and when they drop, and the next line is behind them, and then much later you had people with guns, right? So then you had the first line of soldiers sitting with guns, and then the man would say, "Get set, on your marks, shoot, fire!" And then both sides people would die, and then the next line would rise, and then the same thing, and then hundreds of thousands end up dying like this. This is medieval warfare, right? And it's pretty stupid if you think the way they fought, but that's the way they fought. And what stopped the dying is that people ran away, right? So literally people, what you see in the movies isn't exactly accurate. Right? It wouldn't work like that. People would literally, your instinct would take over and your legs would carry you. When the British soldiers in India questioned the Indians and said, look, this is after the mutiny of 1958, like, why is it that you run away? And the Indian said, it's not us, sir. Sahib, it's not us, it's our legs. They don't obey us, i.e. our legs carry us in the other direction. And there's a very fascinating battle scene I saw of the Papua New Guinean tribes. Papua New Guinea, the Aborigines now more or less, they're not tribal anymore. Like, they're tribal in structure, but they don't live in the outback. They live in regular housing. I'm not sure if any Aborigines living traditionally. But certainly in Papua New Guinea they do. And obviously we know that there's certain tribes in the Amazon, and then there's tribes in Africa that still walk around naked, right? And they still got simple methods. There's an island called the Andaman. Who's heard of the Andaman Islands, by the way? India claims them. They're part of the Indian hegemony. They're under India's administration. Have you heard of the Andaman tribe? The Andaman Islands? Yeah. What's famous about the Andaman?
Not sure, really.
Okay, I want you to YouTube this. It's officially by government decree, it's off limits for you to go to the island. If you decide to leave the coast of India, and I think it's 700 miles away, right, and sail all the way to the Andaman Islands, right, you are, number one, you're going to get killed. Outright, you are going to get killed by the tribe that lives there. And the Indian government isn't going to do anything. In fact, even your British government or no government on earth is going to do anything. Why? Because that tribe is protected, and that tribe is a tribe that wants no contact with the outside world. And for hundreds of years, it's been like that. Nobody on earth has been able to visit that tribe or find out their language properly, or find out, like, nobody's really done that sort of anthropological work. Right? Why? Because they just will not accept anybody coming near them. So you'll see fishermen do end up there, sometimes by mistake, sometimes deliberately going there, and they're killed. They're killed on the beach. This tribe doesn't want anything to do with the outside world. So massacre happened against them. Who was it there in the First World War or the Second World War? The islands were used. The islands were used by, was it the Japanese or was it by other people? And they just wholesale massacred them. It wasn't just Japanese, I'm mistaking with other islands. But a lot of those islands in the Far East have primitive people, simple people living there. And the Japanese and the Brits caused immense harm when they went there. They disturbed their traditional way of living. And what's really funny, I just pepper historical sources only to enrich you, right? Because it gives you a visual of what I'm going to say next. So I'm talking about tribal fighting, Qusay's fight. So you'll realize why I said it at the end of the story. Like detours that enrich the whole story. So what's very funny is some of these tribes in these areas where the British Empire was, they believe King, the Duke of Edinburgh, who's passed away now, they believed that the Duke of Edinburgh was a god. Right? They actually believed Duke of Edinburgh is a god. Any ideas why? Anybody? No? Okay, no ideas why. Are we still here? Are we all alive? Who's in the class?
I'm still here.
Okay, you're still here. Okay, you're all still here. Okay, but you just don't know the answer. I want you to YouTube, or I want you to Google cargo cult. Cargo as in cargo, luggage, load, cargo, and cult as in cult. During sometime in the past, the recent wars or whatever, the British had a base there. So these primitive tribes lived there, and the British every now and then would get aid coming in, cargo, planes coming in with food and, you know, goods that they need to live. They had like a battalion or like a platoon or a base there, right, with, you know, a certain amount of people. And obviously food comes in from outside because these islands are in the Pacific, in the Far East. So every time food came in, before the plane lands, don't forget they've never seen a plane before, right? So it's a big bird in the sky, it's an iron bird. And just before the plane lands, the soldiers have to get ready. The soldiers are on, you know, you have to have a parade line the way you do. And then, you know, when the captain of he comes off the plane, you know, you have the salutes, you have the guard, the honorary guard and all sorts. And sometimes you had Prince of Edinburgh, because he was head of certain corps in the army, and as a result he would come. And obviously you got to show him extra protocol, pay extra attention to the Duke of Edinburgh, because he's Queen Consort. And more people marching, more saluting, more drums and all that business, right? So these people very quickly, these primitive people, simple people, realized that this man is a god because he comes in a flying bird, and every time he comes, he seems to give the people food, right? So what do the people do in order to induce God to come down? They end up marching. They end up doing all of this funny saluting, funny bands happening, funny shouting. And as a result of all of this ritual, a plane appears in the sky and their God comes down and he brings us food. So even to this day, those people, because it's only one generation, right? They believe that the Duke of Edinburgh is a god. And for many years after the war ended and all of this ended, they would reenact these rituals thinking that if we do this, God's going to come down and feed us again. Come on, you're all just boring. No one's finding this story funny. Right? It's called cargo cults, right? Just research cargo cult. Right? And the Duke of Edinburgh from rainy England, and people on the other side of the world, you know, who wouldn't have even known if it wasn't for the war or whatever. I think it was the war. What's going on, right? And they end up having a god who is now dead. And he grew up in rainy England. Well, he was Greek, so he grew up in Greece. But in England, he married and he came to England very young. So that's amazing. Right, so why I mentioned the tribes is because there's another tribe in Papua New Guinea. And this tribe is very famous for its lawlessness. They are just experts at killing each other. They would just kill each other just for the heck of it. Even though now some of them have been partly civilized, they're still at it. Because tribalism doesn't go. This is the disease of tribalism. So they're still at it. There's a video that I saw, and I'm so grateful to have seen this, alhamdulillah, because it put everything into perspective. Everything into perspective. If you look at the dead of Quraysh, they were 300 Sahaba, and there was 1,000 of Quraysh. If you look at the number of dead, it's very little. If you compare the number of dead in any modern battle, the number is very high. But if you look at the Battle of Badr, you will see that the numbers are very low. Why? Why, when in your own mind you're thinking a pitched battle, as you see in the movies, you watch 300, the movie 300, or you watch Gladiator, or you watch, you know, any of those epic movies, and the way you see people fighting, Alexander the Great, or even in the medieval era, the Crusades, you know, the Crusades versus Saladin. The way you see them fight, I'm sure you've all seen Kingdom of Heaven, right? And the way I'm Braveheart, yes, I'm Braveheart. And then, so why is it that a very low number of casualties were taken and a very low number of people died? And why is it that Hazelton, in her book, she's Jewish by the way, and she wrote a book on Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Why is it that she refers to that battle? She's the only one to refer to that battle as a skirmish. Right? I wouldn't say it was a skirmish. I would say it's a battle. It was a battle on traditional lines. That's why there was a very low death count, right? She calls it a skirmish, and you will only understand if you watch that battle scene. I'm not going to post it because we've got ladies in our group and the men are completely naked, by the way, right? So I'm not going to post it. I was thinking of posting it right now, then I realized I've got girls in my group. But you can YouTube it. And this Papua New Guinean tribe was filmed having a tribal war in the 1950s. The whole battle took the whole morning. And all it is a series of guys with spears running this way and then running back and then running this way and then running back with very few injuries and very few serious injuries. The idea is that you tire the opponents out so much that they just give up the will to fight. And in the interim, you're going to take casualties, right? They were firing, they had bows and arrows, but they weren't really firing arrows at each other. They had spears in their hands, but they weren't really throwing the spears. So the casualty count was low, but there was a lot of running through a massive battlefield. It was a huge area. It was literally, as far as the eye could see, you could see warriors on both sides naked with spears, making noises like, you know, when you watch the old Western spaghetti movies of the American Indians making those type noises? All you can hear is those whooping noises that the American Indians make on the battlefield, and they're just fighting in a very primitive way, right? And it just struck me, wallahi, I imagined Badr. And I'm thinking, now it makes sense. Now it makes sense. And that statement of the Indian, our legs, sir, sahib, it's our legs, they carry us away. And then reading some other comments about how traditional battles happened, it's very quick. You know, like once one person runs, everybody runs. It's instinct. In nature, one animal runs, they all run. You startle one gazelle and the whole savannah, they're all running. And the lion that was doing the hunt is thinking, what the hell happened here? How was I exposed so badly? Right? So the same thing happens in war. And it's very interesting to see that, because then it gives you an understanding of what happened in Badr. And it makes sense, because then when you start to, once you've seen that, and then once we get to the battle and we start talking about the battle, you find out, hang on a minute, how did in Uhud, the slave, I'm going to ask a question now, and I want you to give me a genuine answer. Everybody's here, so I want an answer from everybody, including the girls. Wahshi, the Abyssinian slave, ended up killing Hamza in a very brutal way, right? Like it's tragic the way he was stabbed. I'm not talking about what happened to his body, just the spear that went through him, went through his stomach and came out under his pelvis, right? So it's not if you get speared in your chest and it comes out the other way, that's okay. Yani, you're speared. You're going to fall down and die. If you get speared in your stomach and it comes out the other side, you might walk for a bit, but it's come out the other side. Now imagine a spear that goes into your stomach and it comes out your pelvic bone where your leg is or your buttocks are. That's horrific. That's horrific. And that's what happened to Hamza. Right? So, you can't imagine the pain, because that area is full of sensitive nerves. Right? The prostate gland is there. Right? The sex organs are there. And that area naturally is the most sensitive area of the whole human body. Right? And that's how he was spared. And then obviously we know what Hinda did to his body, but that's after he died, right? But imagine being spared like that. It's terrible. And you don't die straight. When you get spared in the stomach, by the way, you don't die straight away, because there's no vital organs apart from the stomach. So your heart still pumps, your kidneys still function, your liver still functions, your brain is still functioning. You don't die straight away. So it's a terrible death. These are the tiny details that I keep pointing out to you that you need to look out for in the seerah. Right? So also a tiny detail is, how did they have their wars? They had their wars. How did Hamza get through? So now I've given you a clue. So can somebody tell me how Wahshi managed to get through? If there's a mad battle of Quraysh fighting the Meccans, and there are 4,000 Quraysh, 3,000 Quraysh, and there's like 1,000 Meccans, can somebody tell me how can you identify and not get picked out? Why were the slaves untouched? Why were they not gunned down, so to speak? You know, like heads smashed open with maces and spears and swords. And how did they manage to give each other water? How did they manage to give each other first aid? How did they manage to give each other comfort on the battlefield when the battle is raging? Right? How when you hear of certain stories in Badr as well, you're thinking, how was there enough time for this conversation? Because when I watch Gladiator, or when I watch, well, not me personally, but I'm just talking, when I watch Gladiator or when I watch 300, we don't see that. We see madness. We see a melee action. We see just a man just, like fighting 10 people and killing them all, and then he's getting ambushed, and then he dies, and then there's 10 other people take over, and everybody's left dead. So then how do we understand those Seerah stories? So can somebody tell me how Wahshi managed to get through without being killed himself, and he found his target in amongst 4,000 people? Can somebody tell me how, please?
I'm not sure. Maybe it just caught him off guard.
How was he not killed by... He's an enemy. He's a slave who's carrying a spear, which means you're an enemy now. Right? You're a slave who's been bought into an army. The army, if you're a slave with nothing, the other side...
Wasn't it that he was given a specific task just to kill Hamza?
That's all his task was, and he fulfilled it. But I'm going to ask you a question. Yeah, but I'm going to ask you a question now. So you are of the Muslims. So you're the Madinans, right? So you know your enemies. You know them. You know your friends. And sometimes it's difficult in a battle. Yes, I can give you that, right? But in this battle, I don't think it was difficult. He is a slave. He's dressed like a slave, right? He's black. He's dressed like a slave, and he has a spear. If I see a slave on the battlefield, I'm from the Medinan side. If I see a slave on the battlefield, I may let him go, thinking maskeen, he's only there because the Meccans forced him to come. He's not fighting. He's probably there to give them first aid in respite. He's probably going to carry water to them. I'm not going to kill him. Maybe I will kill him. Maybe just by virtue of the fact that he's on the battlefield. But then again, the women came onto the battlefield as well. So you don't kill the slaves. But if a slave happens to have a spear, I know that the Meccans have made him fight. If I was a companion, I know that he's there to fight the Medinans, because he's got a goddamn spear in his hand. So I'm going to take him out. Right? But why is it that he managed to get through? He got through. You will only know if you look at that video of those Papua New Guinean people fighting in the 1950s, dressed naked with spears and bow and arrows. They spread themselves so vastly on the battlefield. There were hundreds of them, but they spread themselves so vastly on the battlefield, and they run back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's their kind of fighting. So Wahshi, who had one single job to do, he wasn't around anybody to get picked out. He's too far. You're too far from your nearest person. The enemy is far from you, and even your nearest person is far from you. So it's very easy for him to run in the rhythm of the battle. Back and forth, bit closer. Back and forth, a bit closer. Oh, Hamza's moved that way because I can see him, because he's also spread out. Hamza's on his own. Everybody stands in a big gap. You're not going to make a tight circle and get picked out. Everybody's making a big gap. So let's just keep my eye on Hamza. It's not easy to see where he is. It's not hard to see him because he's on his own. And his distinctive armor and his body shape, I know who Hamza is. Oh, there's somebody 20 yards away from me. Just move back a little bit. He's not going to chase me. Right? And then, oh, they're moving the other way. Get a bit closer. Oh, they're moving backwards again. Let's move back a bit. Oh, they're moving a bit closer. I'm even closer now. Do you see what's happening? And then he saw his chance. He done his job and he safely escaped without anybody doing him any harm. You can only understand this way of Badr if you see this battle, by the way. Right? Because we have this warped idea of the Uhud, sorry, this battle happened in Uhud. You can only know this, any battle, how Uhud was fought, Badr was fought, by looking at the battles of old. And this tribe, in the comments, people were saying that not even the Romans 2,000 years ago fought like this. Then somebody was saying not even the Crusaders 1,000 years ago fought like this. Somebody said, forget that, not even the Sumerians 6,000 years ago fought like this. And he's probably right. What he means is with the armor, more advanced weaponry, because the Sumerians had advanced, what's advanced? Just armor, and they probably had, much later we had the horse and the cart. One man is riding the horse and the cart, and one man is shooting or fighting. Then afterwards it became different than this also. And you'll see the horse and cart if you read Asterix and Obelix. You'll see what I'm talking about. I like Asterix. I told you, look, Asterix and Obelix, read it for the history, because they reenact many of the weaponry and many of the things, and you can see the Roman formations, and you can see the various ranks of the Romans, and it's really nice. It just fits in nicely with your history lessons as a nice treat, by the way. So so in the 1950s, these people are fighting in an even more primitive state than the Sumerians did, and the Egyptians did, and the Assyrians did, like 6,000 to 4,000 years ago, right? And that's the most primitive it gets. So when you see that, you can understand Islamic battles. So I'll post the link, but girls, please don't click on it, because there's naked men running around. Right, so this battle, I'm taking it back to Qusay. So later fighting broke out and an arbitration was agreed by Ya'mur ibn Auf, who ruled in favor of Qusay. So what was the fighting? What was the arbitration? What kind of battle was it? It couldn't have been a big one, because the population wasn't that large at the moment. The Quraysh never had a large population. The Khuza'a had a larger population, but not as large as we know afterwards. And you don't fight to lose your men, because if you do, your tribe is wiped out. So it was probably a melee. It was probably where one group tied out, the other group tied out, and then they said, okay, that's it, we're done, right? And then arbitration happened. Qusay called these people to settle around Mecca. It was agreed. Qusay gets to keep it. This begs the question that did the people all live in tents up to that time? This is a very good question to ask, by the way. If the people in Mecca lived outside, I would say 99.9% chance all of Quraysh lived outside of Mecca in tents at that time. And with tents means that you're living a very primitive, very simple life, right? Like I'm talking about the most simple you can think about. They weren't traders, they weren't rich, they weren't wealthy. They didn't really sit astride a trade route. They were on the side of one. And they weren't known as middleman traders, even if they did sit astride a trade route, right? So just imagine very simple people. The Jurhamites and the Khuza'a. Okay, so time is coming up to 2 hours. We basically started Qusay. So do you think we should end it here and then carry on next week, by the way?
I'm going to have to finish at 8 because I've got something.
Yeah, so I think it's good to finish it here then, right? So we will just carry on with the Jurhamites and the Khuza'a. And then, because it gets really interesting, I don't want to rush it. It gets interesting after this, because we start to delve into the rivalries of the Quraysh that led to the massacres of Al-Hussein, of Karbala, and carried on until the destruction of the Umayyads, right? So that rivalry started here. So we want to show it and not rush through things. So I think we call it a day here today, right? I know it's short. It seems like we're not, because we're used to 5-hour classes, it seems like we're not covering a lot of information. But bearing in mind, a 2-hour class for a normal class covers a hell of a lot of information, but we're just used to longer classes. So I hope nobody minds. So we'll call it a day here, everybody. And inshallah, we'll meet again next week, inshallah. Yep?
Oh, thanks for that.
Okay, cool. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, everybody's welcome. Thank you very much, everybody, and may Allah reward us. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على أسعد ما محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نور الهدى محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله.
اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.